While most CEOs do not give employee well-being much thought, here and today you and I will. And if you'll join me on the journey to employee well-being, I guarantee you it will be one of the more interesting and rewarding things that you can possibly do as a director. Workplaces with low well-being have significantly increased levels of employee stress, anxiety, and depression. They have embarrassingly low levels of engagement and productivity, and their turnover and absenteeism is too high. It is impacting your organizations right now as we speak, whether you know it or not, financially. It's threatening their competitive positions, and it's threatening their ability to attract and retain talent. And in the near-term future, for better or worse, it will impact your reputation. And there are many more workplaces in America today that have low well-being than high well-being. This shouldn't surprise us very much, given how corporate America has treated its employees over the past 25 years. They've used them up, ground them up, spit them out, and discarded them like used furniture without much thought as to their well-being and their future. And there are consequences to that, as we're going to talk about today. I'd like to introduce you to somebody that you really do need to get to know. Sarah's a 45-year-old employee at a Midwestern hospital system. She could just as easily be an employee at your organizations. She actually represents a composite of entirely too many employees in America today. A single mother of three, Sarah struggles to make ends meet. She's paid below her state's median wage, believe it or not, as a nurse. She can't afford to save for significant financial emergencies, much less retirement. Sarah's a good candidate for psychological counseling given her mental and emotional challenges, but she's afraid to ask for time off at work due to stigma in the workplace. Sarah is in survival mode. She really doesn't care much about her job at all other than keeping it. There are millions like Sarah in the workplace that are facing the same physical, mental and emotional and financial challenges to their health and their productivity, and therefore the productivity, competitiveness, and financial results of your organizations. They are having your engagement and productivity. They are fueling your out-of-control healthcare costs with their chronic illnesses. They are what's causing your turnover and absenteeism. The costs of low employee well-being are largely invisible to CEOs who are distracted by other more CEO-worthy issues. They just don't think about it very much. And in a sense, why should they when their compensation is based almost entirely on share value and mission success? You notice I use the word well-being and not wellness. So it's important that you understand exactly what it is when I say well-being and what the difference is between well-being and wellness, because it's critically important. Let's look first at workplace wellness. Our society and the medical community in general have approached health through the lens of the physical, and really not taking into account the mental and emotional. As such, it's defined good health or being well by the absence of illness and injury. So it's not very surprising that the workplace wellness community did exactly the same thing, and they gave you such programs as smoking cessation, weight loss, and they focused on such physical conditions as obesity, cancer, diabetes, musculoskeletal issues, and the like. The thinking went like this: to the extent that we could make our employees healthier, they would use up less health care, and our health insurance costs would go down. Nice thought. They might also, in the process, get more productive and more engaged. Per se, there's nothing wrong with that. But it just didn't work for the unhealthy workers who needed whole person well-being to overcome mental and emotional barriers to long-term behavior change to lead healthier lifestyles. It just didn't work. So what happened with workplace wellness in corporate America? It hasn't reduced your turnover and absenteeism. It has failed at a cost to corporate America of in excess of $8 billion a year for largely failed programs. Let's talk about a few of the reasons why workplace wellness programs have failed. The first is that they were not comprehensive. They were random acts of wellness that were parachuted in on employees with little thought as to what they wanted and needed, which is critically important. IBM Watson tells us that while 83% of large employers have a wellness program, 13% are comprehensive. The second reason why they've failed is that they are not strategic. They are not planned, staffed, funded, executed, and held accountable as would be any other mission-critical strategic priority. And they failed. The third reason is, as we discussed, they focus primarily on the physical and not on the mental and emotional issues that are barriers, ultimately, to better physical health. The fourth reason, and as you will see, one of the most important, they're not cultural. Without an underlying foundational culture of well-being, programs will fail because mostly of inadequate participation. And fifth, the reason why it fails is the board of directors are not holding their CEOs accountable for the health and well-being of their employees. Well-being, on the other hand, takes into account the whole person, both physical and mental. In its simplest terms, well-being can be described as a state of good health, happiness, and purpose, judging one's life relatively well, and being engaged. You can see that there are 5 aspects of well-being up there, more or less following the well-being aspects that Gallup and Jim Clifton have espoused in this. So, as you can see, well-being is far more comprehensive than wellness, taking into account, as it does, the mental and emotional barriers to long-term behavior change that's necessary for better physical health. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this that I think will bring it home. If we were all seated here thinking about, okay, how are we going to start a wellness or a well-being program? Why on earth would you focus on smoking cessation and obesity? Obese workers and smoking workers may be your very most productive workers. Secondly, their conditions are probably not incurring massive claims expense for you now and driving up your health care coverage costs. They will in 30 years, hold that thought, but right now they're not. The third reason is that the likelihood that they will lose weight long term and keep it off is pretty slim, so to speak. And giving up smoking, we know at this stage, anybody that smokes really, really likes it. So the chances of success are pretty poor. Instead, why wouldn't you focus on stress, anxiety, and depression in the workplace? Right now, stress, anxiety, and depression in the workplace are greatly impacting the productivity and engagement of your employees right now. Right now, they are incurring claims expense and driving up your health care costs. And the reasons why they can't give up smoking or lose weight, stress, anxiety, and depression most likely. So you see that we're focused on the wrong things. And we start out in the wrong place. And that is part of the message that I need to bring. And thus, we see that sadly, most of today's workplace wellness programs continue to focus on the physical. They don't work. They're not accomplishing better health for the employees at a tune of $8 billion a year. Worse, you simply cannot continue to increase employee shares for health insurance, deductibles, and copays. The low and middle income workers right now are choking to death on those. And what is happening? You know, I think the average deductible today is $1,500. It may be more. What happens is they don't get needed health care because they can't afford it. And what's the first thing to go? It's the preventive care. And that's exactly what you need to have to keep your employees from getting more and more chronically ill, which is the worst thing that's happening in our workplaces today, chronic illness. The cost of low mental and emotional well-being, let me put it this way. More days of absenteeism and work impairment are caused by low mental and emotional well-being. Financial well-being is where you can reasonably provide for yourself and your family, that you can save for realistic financial emergencies, and you can save for retirement. Less than 50% of our workplaces today can fit within that definition. And we know why. Again, it's the stagnant wages that haven't kept pace with the cost of inflation. The economic downturn 10 years ago hit low and middle income workers the hardest, and they just can't do it. Financial stress causes incredibly lower productivity at work. You know what happens when somebody shows up at work and they have a serious financial problem. They're on the phone, they're emailing, they're text messaging about their financial problem. They are not thinking about their job. I'll say it again. Employee well-being is the single most important mission-critical strategic priority facing your organizations today. And you are the leaders of your organizations, but you're missing in action on this issue, I would bet. And I would suggest to you that that is in breach of your fiduciary duty to your organizations to safeguard and protect your organization's most important asset, its intellectual capital and its workforce. As directors, you have the obligation to set strategic priorities for your CEOs and hold them accountable for achieving it. So I'd ask you, when is the last time you've held your CEO accountable for the health and well-being of his or her employees? When is the last time, as a board at a meeting, you have even discussed the health and well-being of your employees? Do you as a director, or does your board, know the levels of stress, anxiety, and depression in your workplace? Do you know the levels of turnover and absenteeism in your workplace? Do you know how chronically ill your employees are? Do you know, through surveys or whatever, do they really hate their bosses? Aren't these important things to know? And my bet is you don't know them. And that's not surprising because the vast majority of board members don't. And I've thought about this, well, why is that? Because it does seem to be important. And I can think of two reasons at least. The first of which is, as good board members, you are mindful of the dividing line between the board's obligation of strategic oversight of your CEO and management prerogative. And as good board members, you try, it's really wicked tough, but you try not to wander off into the in-the-weeds management priority side of the issue. And the second reason is that the truth is you just haven't thought about it much. You've been distracted by other more boardly issues like finance. Oh, there are others. That huge IT project that's over budget and behind schedule. I had one too, and it's all I thought about for a while. Yes, and you're distracted by other issues, and you don't think about it. I would hope that right here and now, that changes for you. I would submit to you that there is nothing that you can bring back to your organizations that is more valuable than what we're talking about here. And I would suggest that if you go back to your organizations and convince your boards and your CEO to adopt employee well-being as a mission-critical strategic priority and then follow through on it, you will have done more for your organizations than any other thing that you can do during your career as a director. And you will have left a hell of a fine legacy. As directors, you are the only ones that can make this the CEO's unique focus. You are the ones that can be part of a national movement to improve workplaces and make employees' lives better and improve your own organizations in every way imaginable, whether it's financially, competitively, socially, morally, and ethically, and those two, I would submit, are important. CEOs come and go, but boards are timeless. And as board members, you should have a tradition of the more senior board members passing employee well-being down to the new board members coming on to keep this alive and keep it fresh. And I ask you, what better legacy would you ever have than this sort of thing? And perhaps even Sarah might become more productive and more engaged and live a better life. Thank you very much.